My name is Betty, 16 years old. The knock on my bedroom door came like a drumbeat against the quiet of that Wednesday evening. I had been lying on my bed, sketching half-heartedly in my notebook, when my mother's voice called through the wood, groggy and strained. "Betty, honey, I need to talk to you." When I pushed open the door, I found her sitting awkwardly in the recliner, her right wrist wrapped in layers of white gauze. She looked small, almost fragile, her eyes foggy from the prescription painkillers the doctor had sent her home with. 2 days before Thanksgiving, and she had slipped in the kitchen, shattering her wrist on the cold tile floor. I could still see the shock in her face from earlier at the hospital, though she tried to mask it now with a thin smile. "Sarah can handle it," she announced suddenly, her voice too bright, like she was speaking through a haze. My mother always slipped my cousin's name into conversations when she was medicated, but after a pause she corrected herself. "No, you can handle it. You've been helping me cook for years." Helping. That word sounded like a joke. Yes, I had peeled potatoes and stirred gravy under her watchful eye, but helping didn't mean preparing an entire feast for 23 relatives with no guidance and barely 48 hours. I stared at her, waiting for her to laugh, to admit she was teasing me, but she only leaned back, wincing as her wrist shifted. "You'll be fine. You've watched me long enough." Something inside me clenched. I wanted to protest, to shout that I wasn't ready, but her eyelids were already fluttering shut. The painkillers dragged her back under, leaving me standing in the hallway with the impossible weight of her words pressing down on me. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with a pad of paper, scribbling down every dish I could remember her making. Turkey, stuffing, rolls, cranberry sauce, mashed potatoes, green bean casserole. The list seemed endless. My hand trembled as I calculated how much of everything I'd need. I cried quietly when the numbers didn't add up. Thanksgiving morning came like a tidal wave. The kitchen filled with steam, clattering pans, and the acrid smell of smoke when I burnt the first batch of rolls. I remember standing barefoot on the cold linoleum at 2 a.m, hands dusted with flour, eyes stinging with exhaustion. At 3 a.m, I slumped against the counter, whispering to myself that I couldn't do it. But then I thought of my father, of how he looked at my mother like she hung the moon whenever she pulled off these feasts. I wanted that look, even if it meant sacrificing myself. By noon, when the family began to arrive, the house smelled of roasting turkey and cinnamon pies. I moved through the kitchen like a ghost, smiling thinly as cousins and aunts breezed in, leaving their coats on chairs before wandering back out to the living room, where laughter and football filled the air. "Betty, the rolls smell wonderful," Aunt Marie said, poking her head into the kitchen. She plucked one off the tray, took a bite, then shrugged. "A little burnt, but still good." She left before I could answer. When the meal was finally served, I carried platters out with shaking arms. My father stood at the head of the table, clapping his hands. "Sarah, no, Betty, did such a wonderful job," he boomed, misnaming me at first in the confusion of praise. My mother, her wrist in a sling, beamed proudly, as if she had orchestrated every dish herself. "You're so lucky to have such a capable daughter," someone said. I caught the words like they were meant for me, but the way my mother smiled and nodded made it feel like the compliment belonged to her. I sat at the corner of the table with a plate balanced on my knees, too tired to eat. The turkey was a little dry, the rolls overbaked, the gravy lumpy, but no one seemed to mind. They laughed and ate and toasted, and for a brief moment, their praise warmed me. Being useful felt good. Being needed felt like love. After dessert, I slipped away into the pantry, sank to the floor, and let the exhaustion wash over me. My fingers were red and raw from scrubbing pans. My back ached from standing all day. And yet, as I sat there in the quiet, I whispered to myself, maybe this is who I'm supposed to be. The following morning, while I was still half asleep, I heard my father's voice through the thin walls of our house. He was speaking with my mother, his tone filled with amusement. "Well, next year we'll let Betty handle everything. She's clearly got a gift for this." I froze, my stomach twisting. My mother chuckled softly, the sound muffled by the bedroom door. "Of course, she's practically grown now. She can manage." The decision was made without me, my future bound in 2 casual sentences. I wanted to run into their room and say no, to plead for them to remember I was just 16. But something in me stayed silent. Maybe it was fear, maybe it was pride, or maybe it was the dangerous thrill of knowing that for once, the family had noticed me. That was 18 years ago. What started as emergency help had quietly, almost invisibly, solidified into expectation. Even now, I can still taste the metallic bite of exhaustion in my mouth, still hear the faint echo of their voices in the dark. She can handle it. She'll do it again. I didn't know it then, but that moment was the beginning of a tradition that would consume me. And once a tradition begins in my family, it is nearly impossible to break. Over the next few years, Thanksgiving stopped being a holiday and became a schedule taped inside my head. By September, I was scrolling sales, mapping coupons, counting mouths. By October, I was stockpiling flour, broth, butter, and foil like a storm was coming. It always was. The guest list swelled as cousins married and had babies, and as those babies turned into toddlers with preferences and allergies and their own tiny opinions. 23 became 26, then 28, then 30, sometimes more, depending on whether anyone brought just a friend. I learned to keep emergency chairs in the hall closet and extra napkins in the laundry room. People began to talk about Betty's Thanksgiving, the way small towns talk about the one good diner. It turned into a brand I never meant to create. Her stuffing, they'd say, the best I've ever had. Her gravy? Perfect. Silky. They'd post pictures of my food with captions, tagging each other while I was still in the kitchen, basting, searing, whisking, sweat gathering at the nape of my neck. If I was lucky, I'd catch those posts late at night after everyone had left, seeing my work framed in someone else's gratitude like I wasn't even in the room where it happened. On paper, I wasn't alone. There were plenty of relatives within arm's reach of a cutting board. In practice, help was a mist, present until you tried to touch it. Someone would poke a head in. "Let me know if you need anything." I'd say, "Could you cube those sweet potatoes?" And they'd suddenly remember a phone call. I'd ask, "Can you stir the gravy while I plate the beans?" And they'd smile apologetically. "We don't want to get in your way. You've got a rhythm. We'll just mess it up." It became a family script. Praise in the doorway, retreat to the couch. I built systems to survive. Spreadsheets organized by oven rack and minute-by-minute timing. Labels on fridge shelves. Wednesday prepped sides. Thursday final bake. Do not touch. I learned which dish could hold heat without dying, which pie likes the bottom rack, and how to coax a reluctant gravy back from the brink with stock and a whisper of vinegar. I could tell time by the sound of my father's laugh in the living room, deeper and closer together as the game got good, while I hovered over a thermometer, waiting for turkey to drift from 160 to 165 without overshooting. The kitchen timer became a metronome for my heartbeat. No one saw any of that. They saw a parade of dishes slide through a swinging door, hot and fragrant and apparently effortless. They saw me, hair knotted back, face ruddy, with a smile I wore like oven mitts, utilitarian protection, not warmth. They saw plates refilled as if the table itself were generating food. When I finally made a plate for myself, it lived on the counter, where I took harried bites between rinsing pans and rotating trays. I learned to eat like a bird, then like a thief. There was a particular quality to the critique that came wrapped as concern. "Last year the turkey was a little dry," someone would say lightly, fork hovering at my shoulder. "Maybe brine longer?" A cousin would murmur, "Could the stuffing be a touch less salty this time?" A great uncle would chuckle, "Aunt Marie's rolls used to be better, but yours are fine." The word fine did a particular kind of violence. It made my effort sound like an accident that had turned out okay. One year, as I stood balancing 3 trays, the green beans slick with butter, the carrots glazed and freckled with thyme, a lemon tart wobbling on its tin, my father blocked the hallway with a grin. "Kiddo, you outdo yourself every single year." He reached to ruffle my hair, then stopped at the last second, remembering I wasn't 6. "Your mother says you've got the touch." I smiled, breathless. "You could hold this," I offered, shifting the tart. He stepped back, hands up, a laugh covering retreat. "Oh, I'll just get out of your way." That was the refrain, "I'll get out of your way." What they meant was, "I'll keep this easy for me." They framed it as respect for my competence. I tried to believe them. Sometimes, late at night when the house was finally quiet, I did. "They trust you," I told myself, sliding pans into soapy water. "They're trying not to disrupt." But the truth whistled through the crack under the kitchen door. They were comfortable. I was their comfort. The logistics alone could have been a full-time job. Shopping for 30 meant 2 carts, and the choreography of a general, how to move through the store without backtracking, which cashier moved fastest without crushing berries, how to stack eggs around the turkey without casualties. I kept a cooler in the trunk and learned the names of produce managers. The week of, my phone filled with alarms. Stock the bread cubes, thaw the stock, mac and cheese base now. I wrote to-do lists on my palm when paper went missing. There was a rhythm to it that satisfied the part of me that loves to solve problems. If you don't look up, solving can feel like love. But the cost was the missing. I missed first steps and second touchdowns, and the quiet half hour when the TV volume dips and people talk like themselves. I missed the part where you catch a cousin in the hall and hear the real version of their year. I missed the beginning of inside jokes and showed up at the end, smiling like I understood. When I finally sat, the cranberry sauce had gelled into a red tile and my gravy had skinned over. Someone would shout from the living room, "Dessert?" and I would stand again. I wasn't a martyr. I took the praise. I held it like a heat pack against the ache. "You're extraordinary," an aunt would say, kissing my cheek, and I'd nod, ashamed of how much I needed it. "We're so lucky you do this," my mother would tell me while arranging herself at the center of the table, her good wrist raising a glass. Everyone would look at her. I would look at my hands, the faint scars on my knuckles, the way they had become tools. The more they admired, the more the stakes rose. Requests multiplied, free as air. "Could we add a dairy-free mac and cheese?" "My friend's bringing her boyfriend. He doesn't eat onions." "You'll make a separate pan of stuffing without nuts, right? And another without gluten?" The word separate began to feel like a slice taken from me. I was additive, divisible, replicable, until I wasn't, until I came up short and felt like I had failed them, like failing them was failing at being loved. There were brief moments when someone's hand would land on my shoulder in a way that felt like an anchor, not a press. My brother once stood beside me, drying pans without a word. We didn't talk much when the house was full. Neither of us liked to be overheard, but he stayed long enough to make my back stop aching. "You don't have to do all this," he said finally, voice low. I remember glancing toward the doorway. "Try telling them that." He snorted. "You know I won't." A beat. "But I'll be here." It helped. Not enough to change the shape of the day. Enough to let me breathe. The house had its own weather on Thanksgiving. The kitchen ran hot, humid with steam, the windows fogging acres of white. The dining room stayed temperate, wine glass clinks like soft ice. The living room cooled under the TV's glow, voices swelling during commercials. I learned to calibrate my body to all 3 temperatures without crossing the threshold. Sometimes I'd stand at the frame between rooms and feel the climate shift on my skin. It felt like proof that I lived in a different season from everyone else. They meant well, most of them. That's important to say. They loved me in the ways they understood love. Compliments, second helpings, to-go containers pressed into grateful hands. They didn't notice the way my shoulders rounded more each year, how my laugh thinned at the edges. They didn't notice because noticing would require reassigning labor, and reassigning labor would rearrange the holiday, and rearranging the holiday would threaten the memory they were trying to keep alive. Tradition is just a story you tell with the door closed. One year, after everyone left and the house exhaled, I found a note on the counter in my mother's careful hand. "You make us proud. You make this family possible." I read it twice, then stuck it under a magnet. It stayed there for a long time. I still don't know whether it was a benediction or a sentence. Around my mid-20s, my body began to tell the truth my mouth wouldn't. My feet ached for days afterward. My wrists throbbed from whisking. A migraine bloomed behind my eyes every time the oven timer screamed. And still, when an aunt wandered into the kitchen on the way to refill her wine, she'd say, "I don't know how you do it." And I'd answer, "Me neither," and played another round of sides like a magician pulling coins from air. In the quietest moments, those rare minutes when the dishwasher hummed and the house flickered low, I'd catch myself leaning on the counter, staring at my reflection in the dark window. My face looked older there. My mouth carried a private set of parentheses when I wasn't using it. I'd press my fingers to the glass, as if the other version of me might press back, might tell me how to step through. Instead, the doorbell would ring. Another late cousin, another friend of a friend. We heard about Betty's Thanksgiving, they'd gush, stepping into the warmth. We just had to experience it. I would smile and take their coats, and somewhere inside me, a small door clicked shut. The thing about a prison made of praise is that the bars are soft, and you can sleep against them for years. You don't notice they're strong until you try to push. By the time I hit my mid-20s, my body felt older than my years. Thanksgiving had turned into a marathon that left me limping for days afterward. My wrists burned from constant chopping, my back throbbed from standing over steaming pots, and my eyes carried dark hollows that even makeup couldn't disguise. Friends at work would ask about my plans for the holiday, their voices full of warmth. "We're going to my aunt's this year," one would say. "Everyone brings a dish. It's chaotic but fun." Another would grin. "Our family orders pies from the bakery. Less stress, more wine." When they turned to me, I gave the same answer every year. "I can't. I'm cooking for my family." There was always a beat of silence, then puzzled looks. "But can't someone else cook? Or can't everyone bring something?" I'd force a laugh. "Not in my family. It's tradition." I left out the part where that tradition felt less like heritage and more like a chain. College gave me the only reprieve I'd had since that first Thanksgiving at 16. Being hours away, I had an excuse that no one could argue with: distance. My mother called those years the dark holidays, sighing on the phone as she asked for recipes, my father chiming in with complaints that the food just wasn't the same without me. I remember sitting in my dorm room, listening to the guilt drip through the receiver. "You'll be home next year, right? It's just not Thanksgiving without your touch." I hung up each time with a knot in my chest. But after graduation, the temporary freedom evaporated. I was back within driving distance, and they slid me seamlessly back into my role as head chef. No one even asked if I wanted it. They just assumed. The year I returned, my father said it casually, like he was commenting on the weather. "You learned so much in college. I bet Thanksgiving will be easier now." As if my degree in communications somehow doubled as a culinary credential. The worst part was that I said nothing. Not then. I let the tradition reattach itself like ivy, curling tighter each year. One Thanksgiving in particular etched itself into my memory. I was 27. The day before, I had finished a brutal work week with back-to-back deadlines, but when I walked into my parents' house, there was already a list waiting for me on the fridge. My father had scribbled names beside each dish, but every single one of them had my name next to it. I stood staring at the paper when he walked in with a stack of folding chairs. "Oh, and I forgot to mention, we've got 30 this year. A couple of folks are bringing friends." 30? I turned, the word catching in my throat. "Yeah, shouldn't be a problem, right?" He said it like it was obvious, like I was a well-oiled machine. "You always handle whatever we throw at you." I swallowed hard, my hands clenched at my sides. "I do mind." His brow furrowed, confused. "What?" "I mind. I can't just cook for 30 people with 3 days' notice." My voice cracked. For the first time, he looked at me like I had spoken a foreign language. "But you've always handled it. What's different now?" What was different? I was exhausted, bone-deep tired of being taken for granted. I wanted to scream, "What's different is that I've been doing this for over a decade without help. What's different is that I've never had a Thanksgiving of my own." But the words lodged in my throat. I simply shook my head and walked away, leaving him standing in the kitchen with a baffled look. That night, I lay awake replaying the conversation. The truth haunted me. I had never taught them how to see me differently. Every time I bit my tongue, every time I smiled through the fatigue, I had reinforced their belief that I could handle it, that I would handle it. And maybe, part of me feared what would happen if I stopped. Would they still love me if I wasn't useful? The guilt was sharpest when I considered saying no. In my family, tradition was sacred. To suggest change was to suggest betrayal. I imagined the chorus of horror if I proposed potluck. "It won't be the same. You're better at it than anyone else. Why ruin what works?" Their shock would be real, their disappointment heavy enough to crush me. So I swallowed it. Again. Still, the resentment simmered. I noticed details I had ignored before. The way my mother accepted praise for my cooking with a satisfied nod, as if she'd passed her craft down flawlessly. The way relatives bragged about our Thanksgiving, without once thanking me directly. Even when compliments landed, they felt hollow. The most telling moment came a year later when my cousin Amanda arrived with her new boyfriend. She handed me a folded list at the door. "He's really picky," she whispered. "Allergies, too. Could you make sure there are options for him?" I unfolded the paper and scanned it. No dairy, no onions, no peppers, no shellfish, no gluten, no soy. My jaw dropped. "Amanda, I've already planned the entire menu." She blinked innocently. "Well, can't you just adjust? It's Thanksgiving. You don't want him to feel left out, do you?" Something inside me snapped. Maybe he can bring something he likes. Her face froze, scandalized. "Betty, don't be difficult. It's just food." Just food. The words echoed like a slap. To her, it was a minor inconvenience. To me, it was hours of labor, sweat, and exhaustion. Later that night, as I stirred yet another pot, I found myself whispering, "Am I their daughter, their cousin, or their caterer?" The line between family and staff had blurred so completely that even I wasn't sure anymore. That Thanksgiving ended, as always, with everyone full and happy, but I collapsed into bed aching. Resentment coiled in my chest. When I woke the next morning, my phone buzzed, with a dozen messages praising the food, thanking me for keeping tradition alive. None of them asked how I felt. It was the beginning of something shifting in me, a quiet voice that grew louder each year. This isn't love. This is labor dressed up as gratitude. I didn't know it yet, but the cracks in my silence had started to show. And cracks, given enough pressure, always turn into fractures. The cracks widened quickly. By the time I was 28, Thanksgiving was no longer just exhausting, it was unbearable. The requests had multiplied into demands, and every demand felt like another stone tied to my chest. It started small. My cousin Amanda's boyfriend from the year before, he was long gone, but the precedent lingered. The following Thanksgiving, my brother's wife announced she had gone gluten-free. She expected me to prepare alternate versions of nearly every dish. I remember standing at the counter, hands submerged in flour, when she breezed into the kitchen, her voice casual. "I can't eat gluten anymore, so I'll need special stuffing, rolls, and pie crusts. Oh, and can you make sure the gravy thickener isn't flour?" I blinked, my knuckles whitening around the bowl. That would double my workload. She frowned, tilting her head as if I'd failed some moral test. "Are you saying you can't support my health journey?" The accusation stung more than it should have. Support. As though years of sacrificing my holiday, my body, my sanity, didn't count as support. I wanted to snap, to tell her that if her health mattered that much, she could cook her own dishes. But instead, I gritted my teeth and said nothing. Silence had become my language. The truth was, my silence protected them while it hollowed me out. Each year, another request appeared like an unwelcome guest. Dairy-free casseroles, vegan side dishes, nut-free pies, low-sodium everything. Every time, I bent, stretched, and scrambled until I was so thinly spread I could barely breathe. And yet, when the food hit the table, the critiques came anyway. The turkey could use more brining. The pie crust is a bit tough. Aunt Marie's rolls were lighter. Their voices were soft, even polite, but every word felt like a needle slipping under my skin. By then, my inner dialogue had shifted into something sharp. Do they even see me? Or am I just a pair of hands attached to their holiday? The breaking point came during one particularly disastrous Thanksgiving. The guest list had grown to 32 after my father casually told people to bring whoever. He handed me the updated number 3 days before. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the list, my vision blurring. "I can't do this," I whispered, but no one heard. That morning, I moved like a machine. My face was set, my body rigid. I burned the sweet potatoes, undercooked the beans, and forgot to thaw one of the pies. Guests poured in, their laughter filling the house, but the kitchen smelled of stress. By noon, my chest ached, my temples pulsed, and my hands trembled so badly I nearly dropped the turkey platter. I snapped at my niece for touching the rolls. I hissed at my cousin when he asked if there'd be more gravy. By the time the meal hit the table, my eyes were red, my smile brittle. I excused myself to the pantry and shut the door. The dim light flickered above me, casting shadows on the canned goods. I pressed my back against the shelves and slid to the floor, silent tears cutting hot tracks down my cheeks. For 15 minutes I sat there, sobbing into my apron, knowing the food was cooling on the table without me. When I finally emerged, I plastered on a smile. I carried dishes, poured wine, and laughed on cue. But inside, something had broken. Later that night, as I scrubbed pots alone, I overheard 2 aunts in the hallway whispering, "She's so moody lately," one said. "Always so stressed," the other replied. "Maybe she needs to handle pressure better." Handle pressure better. Not less pressure, not shared pressure, just better. I bit down on my lip until I tasted blood. That was the moment I realized. They didn't want me happy. They wanted me functional. It was around then that I decided I couldn't keep living like this. The resentment wasn't just simmering anymore, it was boiling over. My body was telling me no. My mind was telling me no. But I didn't know how to say it to them. Not yet. So I did something I'd never done before. I found a therapist. The first session, I sat stiff in the chair, arms crossed, unsure how to begin. "It's about Thanksgiving," I muttered, almost embarrassed. She tilted her head, waiting. "I've been cooking for my family since I was 16. Every year, for 30 people, alone." My voice shook as I said it out loud. "And I hate it, but I can't stop." Her questions were surgical. "Do you enjoy cooking?" I thought back. I used to, when it was helping, when it was optional, but now... I shook my head. Now it feels like prison. "What would happen if you said no?" "They'd be disappointed, angry. They'd guilt me. Thanksgiving would be ruined." "And what if it was ruined?" I stared at her. What? What if Thanksgiving was ruined? What would actually happen? The question lodged in my chest. I opened my mouth, but no words came. Life would go on, wouldn't it? They would find food somehow. Restaurants, potluck, takeout. The world wouldn't stop spinning. But the fear was real. If I wasn't the one holding the holiday together, maybe they wouldn't need me at all. That thought scared me more than exhaustion ever had. I left her office with my head buzzing. The world outside looked the same, but inside me, something was shifting. For the first time in years, I considered a possibility I'd never dared imagine: freedom. It terrified me, and it thrilled me. Therapy peeled me open like an onion. Each week, layer by layer, I uncovered truths I had buried so deeply I hardly recognized them. I wasn't just cooking for Thanksgiving. I was cooking for love, for worth, for the belief that being indispensable meant being valued. But the more I spoke, the clearer it became. My family wasn't cherishing me. They were consuming me. "Helping your family is one thing," my therapist said during one session, her pen tapping against the notepad. "But when help becomes obligation, and obligation becomes identity, that isn't love. That's exploitation." The word made me flinch. Exploitation sounded like something that happened in factories, in sweatshops, not in the soft glow of my parents' dining room. And yet, when I thought about all the Thanksgivings I had spent hunched over roasting pans while laughter rang from the other rooms, the truth tasted bitter. "What do you want Thanksgiving to look like?" she asked one day. No one had ever asked me that before. The answer spilled out before I could stop it. "I want to sit at the table. I want to drink wine before it's gone. I want to laugh at the jokes in real time, not hear them secondhand in the kitchen. I want..." My throat tightened. "I want to feel like part of the family, not the staff." She smiled gently. "Then what would it take for that to happen?" "I'd have to stop cooking." The words left me shaky. It felt like betraying blood. "Or," she said softly, "you'd have to share the cooking." Boundaries don't mean abandonment. They mean balance. Boundaries. A word I had always treated like a locked gate, but maybe it was a bridge. By the time October rolled around, I made myself a quiet promise. This Thanksgiving would be my last as the sole chef. I would cook one more time, announce my retirement, and propose alternatives: potluck, catering, even rotating hosts. I practiced the speech in my bathroom mirror, my reflection nodding solemnly back at me. But tradition is a cunning enemy. The closer the holiday came, the more pressure mounted. 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, my father called. 30 people this year," he said casually, as though reciting the weather. "Uncle Bob's bringing his new girlfriend, vegetarian, so make sure there's plenty she can eat. And Cousin Jennifer's kids are picky, so maybe have some plain pasta ready." I gripped the phone so tightly my knuckles blanched. "Dad, that's too much." "Oh, come on," he chuckled. "You always say that, and then you pull it off. You've got a gift." Gift. The word felt like a curse. My mother chimed in later with her own requests. "Could you try that new apple cranberry pie I saw on TV, and make sure the stuffing isn't too salty this year? Oh, and your brother wants more gravy than last time." Each sentence was another link in a chain I had promised myself I would break. I told myself I would stand firm. I told myself I would not fall back into old patterns. And then, like clockwork, I found myself scribbling shopping lists, mapping oven schedules, clipping coupons. My hands betrayed my heart. 18 years of momentum had its own gravity. 3 days before Thanksgiving, I was at the grocery store with a cart piled high. Butter, cranberries, sweet potatoes, stock, foil. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. I stood in the baking aisle staring at the bags of flour, and something inside me snapped. I didn't want to do this. Not this year, not ever again. The realization hit me so hard, I gripped the cart for balance. I looked at the food, at the endless ingredients I was about to haul home, and felt nothing but dread. Without thinking, I left the cart where it was, half full, abandoned in the aisle. People stared as I walked out, but I didn't care. That night, I sat on my bed, my laptop open, the cursor blinking in the flight search bar. My hands trembled as I typed in destinations. Portland. My best friend lived there. We hadn't seen each other in years, but when I called her, she answered on the second ring. "Are you doing anything for Thanksgiving?" I asked, my voice thin. "Flying to Portland to visit my sister," she said. "Why? Can I come?" There was a beat of silence, then laughter, bright and startled. "Of course, but what about your family's big dinner? Aren't you cooking for like 50 people? 30, I whispered. And no, not this year. Booking the flight felt like buying my freedom. It was expensive, but as the confirmation email hit my inbox, I felt lighter than I had in years. Still, fear gnawed at me. I knew the confrontation was coming. I couldn't just disappear. My father always called the night before Thanksgiving to go over details. I braced myself. Wednesday evening, the phone rang. His voice was cheerful, expectant. "Cooking starts at 4 a.m., right? Oh, and Uncle Bob's girlfriend is vegetarian, so don't forget. And Jennifer's kids." "Dad," I interrupted, my heart pounding so hard I thought he could hear it through the line. "I won't be cooking tomorrow." Silence. "What do you mean?" His voice was sharp now, no trace of humor. "I mean, I'm not cooking Thanksgiving dinner. I'm going out of town." The pause stretched, heavy and suffocating. Then his voice rose, thick with disbelief. "Betty, this isn't funny. 30 people are expecting dinner. Then 30 people will have to figure something else out." My voice shook, but I forced the words out. "I'm not doing it." There was a sharp inhale, then an eruption. "How could you be so selfish? Don't you care about family? Don't you understand what this means?" Guilt poured through the line like hot tar. He cycled from anger to panic to pleading. "We've counted on you for years. Everyone's counting on you. You can't just abandon us." I closed my eyes, hearing my therapist's voice. "Stay calm. Hold your boundary. I'm not abandoning anyone. I'm taking care of myself." The conversation spiraled, his accusations sharp, his desperation louder with every breath. But for the first time in 18 years, I didn't fold. Finally, I hung up. My hands shook as I set the phone down. Seconds later, it buzzed again. And again. Then texts. Guilt, outrage, disbelief. I turned it off. Tomorrow morning, while my family searched for turkey basters and cursed empty ovens, I would be boarding a plane. For the first time in nearly 2 decades, I would wake on Thanksgiving without chains around my wrists. It terrified me, and it thrilled me. Thanksgiving morning began not with the screech of my alarm clock at 4 a.m., but with the soft hum of an Uber pulling up outside my apartment. I climbed in, luggage at my side, heart racing. The driver made small talk, asking if I was heading home for the holiday. I smiled faintly and said, "Something like that." As the car moved through the still dark streets, I felt a strange mix of weight and lightness. The guilt sat heavy in my chest, but beneath it pulsed something I hadn't felt in years: anticipation. The airport buzzed with travelers juggling bags and coffee, the air thick with announcements and reunions. For once, I wasn't dragging grocery lists in my head, calculating cook times, or fretting over gravy. Instead, I stood in line at a cafe, sipping hot coffee and feeling like a person, not a machine. Still, my phone burned in my pocket. I knew the messages were piling up: calls, texts, voicemails, each one carrying anger or disbelief. My father had made it clear last night. They would not accept my absence quietly. For years, I had been their anchor, and now I was cutting the rope. The plane boarded, and as I settled into my window seat, I imagined the chaos unfolding back home. Relatives arriving with empty stomachs and high expectations. My father pacing, my mother wringing her hands. Cousins opening fridge doors to find nothing but condiments. The picture was both horrifying and liberating. When the engines roared to life, I closed my eyes. For the first time in 18 years, I was flying toward freedom instead of trudging into a kitchen prison. Portland was gray and drizzling when I landed, but to me, it looked like sunlight. My best friend Lila waved from the arrivals gate, her grin wide. "I can't believe you actually did it," she said as she hugged me tight. "Neither can I admitted. I feel like I'm doing something illegal." "Illegal?" She laughed, shaking her head. "You're finally living. That's what this is." Her sister's house was tucked in a quiet neighborhood, a modest place filled with warmth. When we walked inside, the smell of roasting chicken, not turkey, welcomed us. 8 people bustled in the kitchen and living room, everyone carrying something. Pies, casseroles, salads, bottles of wine. The energy was chaotic but joyful. "Grab a plate," Lila's sister called. "We all pitch in here." The word startled me. We all pitch in. So simple, so foreign. I found myself standing by the sink, chopping apples for a salad while someone else stirred a pot beside me. No one handed me a list. No one expected perfection. No one vanished when I asked for help. Instead, laughter bounced off the walls as hands brushed past mine, reaching for knives, spoons, plates. Dinner was imperfect in all the right ways. The chicken was slightly overcooked, the pie crust crumbled, and the mashed potatoes had lumps, but no one complained. We ate, we laughed, and I joined every moment. I wasn't hiding in a kitchen. I wasn't sweating under fluorescent lights. I wasn't crying into a pantry shelf. I was part of it. Later, after dishes were stacked and board games spread across the table, I slipped outside into the drizzle. The cool air hit my face and I breathed deeply, tears pricking my eyes. This feeling was what I had been missing all those years. But I couldn't ignore the storm brewing back home. My phone had been off since last night. I knew that when I turned it back on, the flood would come. Angry messages, guilt-laced pleas, maybe even ultimatums. The thought made my stomach knot, but for now, I let the phone stay silent. As the night wound down, Lila nudged me. "How do you feel?" I thought for a long moment, like I've stepped out of someone else's life, like I finally remembered who I am. Her smile was soft. "Then you did the right thing." Still, even as her words comforted me, a shadow lingered. Family doesn't let go easily, and I knew mine would not forgive what they saw as betrayal. The next morning, the moment I had been avoiding arrived. I turned my phone back on. The screen lit up, buzzing nonstop as notifications poured in. 47 messages, a dozen voicemails. I sat on the edge of the bed, bracing myself, and began to read. The first was from my father. "How could you do this to us? 30 people were counting on you. Do you even care about family?" Then my mother. "You humiliated us." Everyone was embarrassed. "This isn't the daughter we raised." Text after text piled up. Aunts furious, cousins bewildered, accusations of selfishness, abandonment, betrayal. The words stabbed, each one reopening wounds I thought had closed. But then, buried among the anger, came something unexpected. "My cousin Mark. I never realized how much work you put into Thanksgiving. I'm sorry we took you for granted." "Aunt Linda, I understand why you needed a break. We should have helped more. Forgive us." And then my brother, quiet as always. "Mom and Dad are furious, but honestly, I'm proud of you. You finally stood up for yourself." The final message came from my teenage niece. It was actually kind of fun figuring dinner out together. We messed up the roles, and Grandpa complained nonstop, but it felt real. "Thanks for shaking things up." I stared at the words, my chest tight. Amidst the storm of guilt and fury, tiny seeds of understanding were beginning to sprout. But I knew the battle was far from over. Friday afternoon, I sat by Lila's sister's window, the Oregon drizzle tapping against the glass, scrolling through message after message. The flood from home was everything I had expected. Anger, guilt, accusations. But what I hadn't expected were the cracks of light breaking through. A cousin's apology, an aunt's admission, my brother's quiet pride, and my niece's surprising gratitude, describing the chaos as fun because it forced everyone to actually do something. The contradictions pulled me in opposite directions. My heart ached with guilt over the pain I had caused, but another part of me, the part that had cried in pantries and eaten standing at counters, felt vindicated. For the first time, someone had admitted what I'd known all along, that I had been carrying too much. Still, the loudest voices were the cruelest. "You ruined Thanksgiving. You abandoned your family. You embarrassed us in front of everyone." My parents' anger rang clearest of all. My father's words replayed in my head like a broken record. Do you even care about family? Family. That word, heavy and sharp, had been the very reason I cooked all those years. Family meant sacrifice, I thought. Family meant doing whatever was necessary to keep traditions alive. But now I wondered, if family only loved you when you gave them everything, was it really love? That evening, Lila found me still staring at my phone, my thumb frozen over the screen. You don't have to read them all at once, she said gently, setting down a mug of tea. I can't help it, I whispered. It feels like, if I don't, I'm ignoring them. And that's what they're accusing me of already. She sat beside me. Ignoring abuse isn't cruelty, Betty. It's survival. The word abuse made me flinch. She saw it and softened her tone. Maybe not intentional abuse, but they've taken advantage of you. You know it. Now they know it too. They just don't like the mirror you held up. I swallowed hard. She was right, but my chest still ached with the weight of their disappointment. The next few weeks were a study in fractured dynamics. Some relatives refused to speak to me at all. My mother's voice on the phone was clipped, frosty, as though every syllable had to pass through ice. You made us look bad, she hissed during one call. People were shocked, embarrassed. They thought we raised you better. I pressed the phone tighter to my ear, anger rising. Raised me better? You raised me to break my back for everyone else while you sat and smiled. That's not fair, she snapped. Neither was the last 18 years. Silence, then the click of her hanging up. My father didn't bother with subtlety. You've become selfish, he said bluntly when he finally called. Do you know how many people went hungry that day because of you? They didn't go hungry, I said, my voice trembling. They improvised. They bought food. They figured it out. That's not the point, he growled. You let us down. No, I whispered. You let me down. That ended the call. But not every conversation was poison. My cousin Mark reached out again, this time with a voice message. Betty, I don't know if you'll believe me, but I really am sorry. Watching everyone scramble without you, it opened my eyes. You've been doing the work of 10 people. I can't believe we never saw it. And Aunt Linda sent a letter, an actual handwritten letter, that arrived in my mailbox one quiet afternoon. I don't know how we became so blind, dear. You deserve better. I hope one day you'll forgive us. I hope one day we can share a meal without you carrying the world on your shoulders. I cried when I read it, not because it fixed everything, but because for once, someone had put into words what I had been aching to hear. Then there was my brother, always the observer, rarely the speaker. He showed up at my apartment one night with a pizza box in hand. Thought you might be hungry, he said simply, stepping inside. We ate in silence for a while before he spoke again. Mom and Dad are furious. They feel humiliated. But me? He met my eyes. I'm proud of you. I blinked back tears. Proud? For ruining Thanksgiving? For finally standing up? For reminding everyone you're not just kitchen staff? He leaned back in his chair. I wish I'd spoken up sooner. I saw it. All those years. I just didn't think you'd ever say no. I didn't either, I admitted. He reached across the table, squeezing my hand. Well, you did, and maybe now things will change. His faith gave me a flicker of hope. But hope didn't erase the fractures. The family was split into camps, those who were angry beyond reason, those who felt guilty but stayed silent, and the rare few who actually understood. Christmas passed awkwardly. I skipped the big gathering, spending it quietly with friends. New Year's arrived, and my phone stayed stubbornly quiet. No cheerful family texts, no invites. It stung, but it also gave me space to breathe. It was clear now, my rebellion had been more than a single act. It had triggered a reckoning. My absence had forced them to confront what they had built on my back. Some resented me for pulling the foundation away. Others, though, had finally begun to see that the foundation itself had been cracked all along. And somewhere inside me, for the first time, a thought began to take root. Maybe this wasn't the end of family. Maybe it was the beginning of something new, something smaller, truer, built not on expectation, but on choice. Still, I couldn't ignore the shadows of betrayal that lingered. Would my parents ever forgive me? Would they ever see me as more than the sum of my labor? The questions followed me into the new year, gnawing at the edges of my peace. The months that followed felt like walking through rubble after a storm. The family I had once thought unshakable now felt fractured, splintered, into smaller, quieter pieces. For some, the fracture was permanent. A few relatives stopped speaking to me entirely. Invitations dried up. Their silence was loud, but I realized it was conditional love I was losing, the kind that depended on my labor. Others, though, began reaching out in tentative, halting ways. My cousin Mark invited me to a small dinner where everyone brought a dish. My Aunt Linda called to ask if I could teach her how to make gravy, laughing nervously as she admitted she'd never tried before. My brother checked in more often, sometimes with pizza, sometimes with just his presence. But my parents were the hardest. My mother carried her disappointment like a badge, letting it color every word. "We never asked you to do it all," she said during one heated call. "You didn't have to ask," I snapped back. "You expected it, you relied on it, and I delivered for 18 years. She went quiet, then murmured, "But you seem to enjoy it." I enjoyed feeling useful, I admitted, my throat tight. I didn't enjoy sacrificing every holiday while you all sat and relaxed. There was a pause so long I thought she had hung up. Then quietly, "We didn't know you felt that way." That was the hardest truth to swallow, that they had never considered my experience. In their minds, I wasn't suffering. I was fulfilling a role, the capable daughter who kept traditions alive. They saw the food, not the exhaustion behind it. It took months of conversations, some sharp, some tender, before they began to understand. My father was slower to bend. He bristled at the idea that he had taken advantage of me. But eventually, even he admitted, "Maybe we leaned too hard on you. Maybe it was easier for us not to see it." The following Thanksgiving was unlike any before. For the first time, we planned it as a potluck. The host rotated. This year, it was my aunt's house. She handled the turkey. Cousins brought sides. My brother made mashed potatoes that were lumpy but heartfelt. My mother baked pies. My father set the table. I brought a salad I liked. Nothing more. The meal wasn't perfect. The turkey was a little dry, the green beans slightly overcooked. But the laughter was warmer, freer. People appreciated their food more because they had contributed to it. Children carried dishes to the table, learning that holidays weren't about consuming but participating. For the first time, I sat with a plate in front of me and ate while the food was still hot. I watched the football game, played with the kids, laughed with my cousins. I was part of the holiday, not its engine. It felt like oxygen. That Portland trip became the seed of a new tradition. Each year since, I've alternated. Sometimes Thanksgiving with my family's potluck, sometimes a getaway with Lila. We've spent the holiday in Portland, in Seattle, even once in San Francisco. Those trips reminded me that holidays could be about discovery and joy instead of obligation and exhaustion. And slowly my family adjusted. Not all of them. Some still carry grudges, muttering about the year Betty ruined Thanksgiving. But those who remained, those who adapted, became closer to me than ever before, because now when I show up, it's by choice, not compulsion. My presence is no longer assumed, it's valued. My kitchen no longer feels like a prison. On quiet evenings, I cook because I want to. Simple meals, joyful meals, meals where no one waits with folded arms demanding perfection. Sometimes I even bake pies for myself, eating them hot from the oven without worrying if they're Instagram worthy. Looking back, I see it clearly. My rebellion didn't destroy my family. It saved it. The old system was unsustainable, built on my silence and their convenience. By refusing to continue, I forced everyone to grow. The ones who only valued me for my labor revealed themselves by cutting contact. The ones who truly loved me adapted, apologized, and began building something healthier. I'm grateful now, not for the years of exhaustion, but for the lessons they carved into me. I've learned that choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's survival. I've learned that love without respect is just control. And I've learned that the most radical way to care for your family is sometimes to stop letting them take advantage of you. This Thanksgiving, as I sat at the table, my niece leaned over with a grin. "Your salad's really good, Aunt Betty. But you know what? I think it's more fun when everyone helps." I laughed, my heart swelling. "Exactly," I said. The house hummed with conversation. The food wasn't flawless, but the joy was. And for once, I wasn't standing in the kitchen, waiting for permission to join. I was already here. And that, I realized, was worth more than any perfect feast I could have ever made.